Hello and welcome to the Emergency Services Times podcast, where you can hear the speakers who joined us on stage at the Emergency Services Show 2024. The move to alternative drive high-performance police cars, the impact on operations and finances. BlueLight Commercial lead this discussion about sourcing and buying electric vehicles that work for the demands of frontline policing, providing you with what you need to know to have this conversation in your force.
So we're going to talk on our session about the move to alternative drive police vehicles, quite specifically high performance vehicles, and just delve into a little bit more about what the impacts are going to be on policing operations and finances. So I'm first going to start with some introductions. I'm Billie Heafield. I'm Head of Category for Estates and Sustainability at BlueLight Commercial. So for those of you who don't know who BlueLight Commercial are, we are an organisation that was put in place by the Home Office back in 2020 to look at transforming commercial services within policing. So we are responsible for a lot of the national commercial activity that gets undertook in place and fostering that collaboration, especially from a vehicles point of view. I'm joined today by Andy Brown, who's our Head of Category for Fleet at BlueLight Commercial. So Andy is responsible for the purchase of vehicles and everything that goes on a vehicle, so tyres, windscreens, telematics, etc., and has a very good relationship and close working at the minute with the OEMs and vehicle manufacturers as we try and navigate our way on vehicle decarbonisation. We've also got Hugh Jones, who is the Fleet Manager from North Wales Police. So it'll be really great to get Hugh's perspective today on the move to alternative drive vehicles from a fleet manager perspective on the ground within a force. And then last but not least, we also have Trystan Bevan, who's a Chief Inspector at North Wales Police. So we're going to get insight from him on what the impacts are going to be with the transition on policing operations. So I'm going to start with you first, Andy. I know over the past 2 years we've had a lot of feedback from police forces in relation to the challenges they've had with fleet decarbonisation, and one of the key ones that's come out is them understanding the equipment that's needed for the transition, both from a vehicle perspective and charging infrastructure perspective, with some actually quite nervous about investing at this moment because technology is changing. So are you able just to provide us an updated sort of proposition of what the transition plans are for alternative drive vehicles, and specifically why high performance vehicles are standing out?
Yeah, thanks Billie. So BlueLight Commercial commissioned a fleet decarbonisation strategy over the last 18 months or so. We've been working with fleet managers such as Hugh and others in relation to those recommendations. That splits out vehicles into a number of different categories of high performance, and high performance 4x4 vehicles used for armed response purposes are two of those. And that provides us with a number of recommendations in relation to all of those categories to be able to think about transition from a decarbonisation perspective, but also recognising that actually electric vehicles might not necessarily be the answer immediately for those requirements, and actually we have to gradually transition towards that. So that decarbonisation strategy talks about other alternative fuel options, so elements such as sustainable fuels and hybrid electric vehicles as well, both plug-in and self-charging hybrid vehicles. So the recommendation at the moment is to look at some of the sustainable fuel options and the hybrid options. The manufacturers and the marketplace are not in a position right now to supply high performance vehicles that meet our requirements in terms of payloads, in terms of miles driven, in terms of cost at this point in time. But we need to get to that point, and we need to work closely, and we have started to work closely with the manufacturers to hopefully align to that and to bring that forward as much as we possibly can to allow them to understand what our needs are. But also we've got to recognise that we are a very small proportion of the marketplace in relation to selling of vehicles and buying of vehicles. So actually the understanding that we have to move towards a position where actually we have to align to what manufacturers are able to offer and are able to bring us. We are also looking at doing things like on-track testing to understand actually what the use case of electric vehicles are. For example, do they derate after being used at top speed for a significant period of time, and actually realistically, what does that look like in terms of that 250 miles that you might get out of your vehicle in normal everyday use? How does that look in a high performance aspect? Our initial understandings is that can be between 40 and 50% less than what that stated manufacturer amount is, because of the clear use and the way that we would use that vehicle. And we're looking at doing more testing and trying to understand that further, but also recognising that technology is going to change rapidly towards that 2035 deadline, but also recognising as well that the government has brought in that VETS deadline to 2035, but managing that incremental change, also recognising that the manufacturers are only able to sell us so many vehicles that don't meet those mandates, because they will get heavy fines if they don't. So we need to think about that from a high performance perspective. We might still be buying petrol and diesel vehicles at this time, but we absolutely have to consider, and it's a key consideration that we have to make in relation to transitioning to then other types of vehicles, to ensure that we keep aligned to those requirements of those manufacturers from that point of view.
Yeah, thank you. And it's very interesting, obviously the fleet decarbonisation strategy that you've been working on provides the short, medium and long-term transition recommendations from a national perspective, but this, when it translates to a local level, is managed by fleet managers. So I'm going to come to you next, Hugh. What would you say are the key challenges with the transition of high-performance vehicles to alternative drive from a fleet manager perspective within your force?
I think there's lots of reasons to not buy an electric vehicle, to be fair, but there's one big reason why we need to, which Andy has alluded to there. The market is going a certain direction. We won't have petrol and diesel vehicles to purchase. The EVs, they're not as convenient as what we're used to. You can't just drive up to a petrol station and fill up in 5 minutes, so it's a big change. And then your high performance vehicles, the weight and the performance is where it is needed the most, and that's the biggest challenge really around charging. I think the risk is that we leave high performance vehicles until the very last, because they're the most difficult category, but the market is going to dictate when we go, not us. So the risk is we're forced to do it before we're ready to do it. So I think my message at the moment to operational colleagues is we need to start looking at this, and we need to start really exploring the possibilities and understand, I guess, the limitations. Excuse me. So I guess I'm going to hand over or put a bit of a challenge to Trystan by saying that our biggest challenge is that on the operational side, there is no real desire. It's as if there's something else is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So if we had buy-in from the operational side that at least it is going to happen, I think we can start exploring some of these challenges and maybe look at where the opportunities are.
Yeah, and I think that the main transition at the moment that's been explored is BEV. What is your relationship like at the moment with your colleagues in the States? Because obviously the buying of the vehicles is just one half of this, and a lot of the feedback we're getting is that the infrastructure needs to be there. And at the moment, I think funding's quite a big challenge from that and that understanding. So have you been having conversations with your States colleagues and that feedback? Because I think from other forces that we've spoken to, we've sometimes got it where we'll buy the BEV, but the infrastructure's not there. I've also had another force where they've put the infrastructure in, but they haven't got the funding to buy the vehicles. What's that relationship been like?
It's which one comes first, the chicken or the egg. So I think we've probably been on that roundabout within my organisation. I don't think it matters. I think we have to acknowledge it's happening. We have to collectively come up with a plan. We're doing that now within our organisation. We're going into a long-term relationship with and building our own internal infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Once that's in place, we can really put firm plans in. The infrastructure's got to grow with the vehicles. There's no point in doing one without the other. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just making sure that we do it, because now is probably a little bit too late. We need to, it needs to happen now, and just working together really and building it together.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll come to you next, Trystan, because I think we've just spoken about that. There's a lot of impacts that are discussed in policing, both the good, the bad and the ugly. So from your perspective, what do you think are going to be the biggest impacts on operations when we transition high-performance vehicles?
Yeah, at the moment I think that it's a case of the officers. What we're talking about here is very strategic in relation to this is where we've got to go, this is what the government's saying, this is the impact going to be. The operational officers out there don't realise what's being pushed down in relation to we are where we are. We've got to either go on this journey or it's going to be forced upon us. And it's people like me then to get that to the operational officers say, this is a journey, we've got to be part of that journey. If we're not part of that journey, we're going to miss out on the things that you want and we need as operational officers is going to be missing possibly. So let's be part of the journey and let's jump onto that. And I think that some of the myths in relation to what we're discussing there, in relation to, how long is the vehicle going to last for us, officers are, and I know who's got some stats in relation to it, but officers are concerned, what if they're halfway through the shift and there's no charge left in the vehicle, what do they do thereafter? Yeah. What if we're in the scene of a fatal on fast roads, are the blue lights going to stop working, are the officers then at risk? All these are things which they've got concerns around, but I think when you come to the end product, the officers they turn up to work, what's the key available, what's the car available, does it do the job, and have they got that faith behind that vehicle is going to work. So I think it's actually marrying up is a challenge for people like myself, the strategic aspect into the operational world, but bring them along with us to understand why we're going down this road. It's not a case of we don't want to buy the Volvo, we don't want to buy the BMW, the diesels and the petrol. It's a case of we've got to start looking at the other options available to you as operational cops to, at the end of the day, give that service to the public. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we have acknowledged that the behavioural change is going to be one of the biggest pieces around this, but I think it's quite interesting there that you mentioned misconceptions. And I don't know, Andy, if you could just touch a little bit on what we've seen from some telematics data, and there is that, I've had people in forces say to me, well, if we go to BV, we're going to need 70% more vehicles because we're going to have so many that needs to be charged and have that operational resilience. What do you think are the biggest sort of common misconceptions from your point of view, Andy?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, is my mic working? There we go. I think from my point of view, so the data that you're referring to, we did a piece of work with our telematics provider across 10,000 vehicles. 50% of those 10,000 vehicles did less than 50 miles a day, which is absolutely achievable with any type of electric vehicle. I appreciate that's not necessarily high performance, but there is that absolute misconception that we need an EV charger for absolutely every single vehicle that we have. That isn't the case, and actually I think one of the byproducts and benefits that we will get from transitioning to EV is that there'll be a fleet optimization review and opportunity there to be able to actually see how effectively vehicles are used, how effectively they're deployed, and are they deployed from the right places at the right times for the right use cases as well from that point of view.
Yeah. Is that similar for yourself, Hugh, in relation to the feedback you're getting from officers in North Wales Police and those misconceptions of, especially for high performance vehicles, because you have got that acceleration and max speed need for those vehicles? What have your experiences been?
I think, so in most roles, there's a buy-in and we're making progress. We're sending small volumes in and it's working quite well. I think in the high performance categories, I think there's a feeling that maybe there's going to be U-turn in the stats, in the amount of when we move to EVs, or maybe there's some alternative fuel. We talk about hydrogen and stuff like that, but it doesn't seem to be moving forward. So I would say, operationally, they think something different's going to happen. However, strategically, we're now having those discussions, and I think there's an understanding there that we have to do something.
Fantastic. So we've spoken quite a lot about the challenges, and some of it is more negative because it is such a big impact on policing. From your perspective, Hugh, what do you think the changes and uses of technology that policing can use that will mitigate those impacts and challenges?
So I think changes operationally, they have to come from the users. There's no point in us saying, you can use drones to do this or, different technology to do that. That has to come from the users, but we need to be a part of that. For me, telematics is key, absolute key. You need we've never needed a full understanding of how a vehicle's used, how long it's parked at the station, how many miles they do in a day. I have got some stats that I prepared for today. I looked at it afresh yesterday morning, and over the last 3 years, armed response vehicle, the most miles they've done in a day was 480 over a 24-hour period, whereas a traffic car, 653. Now that would be a challenge. That isn't going to be an easy thing to fix. However, when you look at the averages, and this is over a 3-year period in cars, firearms vehicles on average will do 140 miles a day, and a traffic car 132 miles a day. So if we can have a process where the vehicle's charged at its home base, and there's opportunities to charge when they're having refs and stuff like that. So if we can get the charging infrastructure right, I think there's an opportunity there to do something without having to change behaviours.
Yeah.
But linked to that, I'm going to contradict myself. I don't think there is a solution out there that doesn't need some compromise or some discussion or some change to tactics either, yeah?
Yeah. And I think it comes back to that misconception that if you have got high-performance vehicles at a particular site, that you're going to need to have ultra-fast, rapid chargers at every station just in case we need to have that, rather than sort of prioritising that usage as more of a forced choice and what you do in relation to your own charging infrastructure versus public infrastructure. So there's definitely work that we can do there. But I think, whilst talking on infrastructure, I know that the focus on this is about the vehicles. I think most of the conversations that I have just on decarbonisation as a whole, the first thing that any of the forces say is we need the money. And as much as there are the challenging targets that have been put on us, money is the biggest challenge, I would say, that comes back to us from a BlueLight commercial point of view, of where even there is that willingness to change within forces, they haven't currently got the budget to be able to do so. So, Andy, from a commercial perspective, what do you think are going to be the impacts on finances for the alternative drive sort of transition with high performance?
Yeah, and I think you've started to touch upon it, Billie, anyway, is I don't think there's any hiding from the fact that there's going to be significant capital expenditure required. It is needed and it will be needed for that charging infrastructure. And what we want to make sure is that we get that right first time. And that doesn't mean that technology isn't going to change. That doesn't mean that we're going to have to think about things again in the future. But what it does mean is that we need to invest now, and we need to invest in the right way. There's no use in having very low-powered chargers in your stations, because realistically they're not going to be of significant use to you in a very, very short period of time from that point of view. But I think on the converse to that is there is potentially a payback period for electric vehicles between 4 and 8 years, depending on what we're buying and what we're looking at, and that infrastructure that's required in relation to that. So although we're seeing that initial capital expenditure, which, let's face it, we're all in police forces, we're all tight in terms of the purse strings, etc. I think we can absolutely try and sell that kind of investor save kind of picture from that point of view. I think you will find and you will see that. I think we all see electric vehicles on the market and we say, oh, electric vehicles, they're much more expensive than internal combustion engine vehicles. And the reality of it is that yes, that is the case in some categories at the moment, but in some categories those prices are very, very close now. They are not as significant from that point of view. Again, we're talking between a potential 10% difference up to about 65% difference at this time. But as that technology improves, as things like solid-state batteries come along, etc., I'm expecting to see both the performance to improve, the battery capacities to improve, but also those price points to come down once they're much more mass market products as well from that side of things. So I think that's really, really important to try and point out that actually there are savings there, and probably touching upon some of the financial challenges that we mentioned earlier, Billie, was actually there are savings to be made here around fleet optimization, because actually, as you pointed out, the data and the telematics data, we've never really analysed that data to that extent before to really look at and consider the position in that respect. Actually, doing that will allow us to optimise that fleet effectively, because there are many fleets out there that are not optimised correctly, and that the use, as I pointed out earlier, those use figures are considerably down. And I mean, I know there's been a number of examples of vehicles not being taken out for days and days on end, and that's just not an effective use of the fleet from that point of view. So Obviously, there are differing priorities within policing, but obviously this is one that is being driven by a government standard and by legislation that we have to comply with. So we need to find the way to do it. And the point is, we're not going to be able to do that in 2034 and say, actually, we need this big, massive check, thank you very much. We need to do that gradually, and we need to bring that and start to bring that into the conversation right now, so we can start to develop that, and that capital kind of replacement program starts to happen now, and is being developed over time, so that we can ensure that actually is in place by 2035 when we need it to be as well.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point in relation to priorities, because when it comes back to funding, obviously with any public sector organisation, we haven't got an endless pot, and there are a lot of important priorities within policing within relation to serving the public that sustainability is going up against. And I think some of that is from a leadership buy-in all the way down to an operational level as to why we're doing this. And I remember when we had the announcement from Rishi Sunak in September of last year that they were moving back the target from 2030 to 2035, and it was like a sigh of relief. And I thought, well, the vehicle manufacturers aren't changing their strategies. Whilst we may have the target pushed back, we won't be able to buy the vehicles, so the sort of conversation was a little bit mute. But taking that back down to an operational level, Trystan, do you think that there's the understanding at the moment across officers as to why we're doing this, and that the change is coming? Do you think that there's more that could be done in relation to this isn't a nice to have, this isn't something that we're doing because we want to be more green, as much as that is obviously something that all organisations should be doing, but this is an operational necessity, and if we don't get it right, it will be an operational risk?
No, I personally don't think that the knowledge is there. The understanding behind that isn't there either. Police officers don't like change, and I put myself into that. I don't think anybody really likes change. But when you bring it down to the must-have, and we need to change, but we need to take them on this journey with us. And I don't think we haven't been doing that effectively in North Wales either. And I keep saying that, you know, a cop turning up to work just wants a key and a car to go out there and do their job. What that car is, they want it as nice as possible and as fast as possible. That's what those policing officers want. I was quite interested in looking at those figures that Hugh's got there, because officers have got their own cars, they stick to those cars, and it'd be quite interesting to see which car and which officers are using it. Were they the 3 operational cops in one area and the same vehicles we use when I've got another 8 vehicles stood in the car park?
Yeah.
So I think it's about changing the mindset, but by changing the mindset, bringing them on that journey. And I keep saying that because if they don't understand why we're doing something, they will push back and not accept it. So the second we get the message out there, clear and bold, to say, come with us, come along on the journey, be part of it, bring that impact, and they can tell us what works and what doesn't. And if you do that, they will be happy with the end product out.
And have any of you received any positive feedback from where we have introduced either BEV or even hybrid, where actually once the officers have started using it, they've seen anything beneficial, or it wasn't as bad as they were anticipating? Has there been anything that you've heard at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'll very quickly become business as usual. It'll very quickly become the norm. In the areas where we have put EVs, they love them. They're new, there's a bit of technology in them, they're comfortable, and they do the job. And any compromises up to now have probably been quite small.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it will be quite a small problem once people start accepting it and we start rolling it out in any volume.
And does that come back to your earlier point that it's easier to park the high performance vehicles at the moment, get it more invested in the fleet with some of the easier categories of vehicles so that officers get used to it whilst the technology catches up to meet our high performance requirements?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The risk is the market changes before we're ready. And I can see that happening really unless we put a bit more effort into it.
So I've just got one final closing question for you guys, which do you personally feel is going to be the biggest challenge or impact to policing? So it's not a fastest finger first, you can say the same thing, because I think we have got quite a few of the same themes here today, but Andy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's that probably what Trystan touched upon, it's that education piece and bringing everybody along for the journey, and that's not just operational colleagues, that's fleet managers as well, that's everybody in this room, that's actually understanding what the need is, why are we doing it, and actually understanding the why and why we can and can't do certain things in certain areas. I think that's absolutely critical, because I think if everybody has that understanding, they will understand the challenges that Hugh faces on a daily basis, the challenges that Trystan faces, the challenges that we face in terms of procuring those vehicles, the challenges that the manufacturers face in terms of turnaround times, lead times on vehicles, making them available to us, etc. Actually, if we can have that understanding, I think if we can all work together to align to that one ultimate goal is the key thing. From that point of view.
Yep. Hugh?
Yeah, I think getting the charging infrastructure right is the key challenge. I think it would be very easy for us to invest too much in it and have too much of a charging infrastructure, more than we need, and that will be very costly. So the data is key. How long a vehicle is parked at a station is key, because that's the opportunity. So that's a key consideration. The biggest challenge I mentioned before for me is getting the operational cops on board, really in the weeds of this is going to be an issue. We can overcome this by X, and these are the opportunities. So that's it from my point of view.
Yeah. So I'll rest on your shoulders then, Trystan.
And I suppose I don't want to keep banging that drum, but to take our end user with us. But also for me, as a operational police officer out there, managing my staff, a large area to police, is we've got to, at the end of the day, remember that we're delivering a service to the public, and we want to make sure that whatever we have still delivers that service to the public, that we're not changing that. So there is expectation. There's bad people out there, we catch them. Are we still going to be able to do that TPAC? Are we doing and is that going to affect our operational capability to catch these people and put them away and give that service to the public? We just need to make sure, keep an eye on that as we're moving along.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's been a very useful chat, and it's good to see from the conversations we've just had the understanding between the three different perspectives. So you understand the operational aspect, whereas you understand the commercial aspect. And I think it is that collaboration, that sharing of information, not just between police forces, but within police forces themselves. And I think we've seen the more successful transition in those where fleet, estates, sustainability, finance and senior leaders are all aligned and communicating with operational staff of what that journey is going to be moving forward. So that's the end of our time now. So I think if anyone's got any questions.
Hi, Sean Williams from Teesside University. So your force in Wales presents quite significant challenges, I'd imagine, in terms of your infrastructure over such a rural, large space. What sort of opportunities do you have in sort of combating that? In terms of the infrastructure layout, the funding, do you get different funding for such a larger area, for example?
The infrastructure challenges.
Yeah, I think in North Wales, it is going to be a case of working differently in how our operational officers are working, because at the moment it's just either returning back to base in order to just park the vehicles up. It's going to be that infrastructure of having every police station is going to have a charger, and from that charger then wherever the officers are having their refs, it'll be a case of they've got to hook up, charge for that hour refs time, and when an operational officer's handing over vehicles etc, will be a case of make sure that it's charged. At no given time is 8 of my patrol cars out from one station at a given time. It's just about changing those vehicles, changing the mindset of it's not just your vehicle, let's think about what we're doing. The cost implication in relation to putting that into place is going to have to be part of that business plan that we're going to put forward, because at the end of the day we are going down this road by hook or by crook. So it is a case of making it work, operational into the strategic, and then at the end of the day delivering that product, which is a usable product for our staff out there. Does that answer? Well, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, if not, I want to, if you can just show your appreciation to Billie, Andy, Hugh and Trystan for their input today.
Thanks for listening. If you like this session, then be sure to browse the rest of the programme for the show. Share the link and subscribe to receive updates on new content from us here at Emergency Services Times.